Hey y'all, happy Sunday. Welcome to another What Else is Going On, aka We Go podcast episode. I'm your girl, your host, Taria. We're getting ready to get into the Real Housewives of OC. Season 19, episode 15, Not So Fun Fetty. It definitely was not fun. And I'm gonna be honest. I know we get over Tamara. There were points in this episode where I agreed with her, and then points where she was so annoying with the whole victim and trying to pull up a tear. I would rather her be the nasty Tamara than the victim Tamara, because Tamara, you're never the victim. Be clear, right? But this episode was an episode. When she had the party though, I was like, oh, come this spring, I'm gonna have a spring fling where everybody dresses up. I liked the theme. The cookies, even though at the end Gina said they was a little dry, and Shannon said, well, you can have some milk. First, before we get right into it, please make sure if you're watching on YouTube to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you are, could you also go over to wherever it is you listen to your podcast? Type in what else is going on podcast and follow me over there and try to let the episodes download and vice versa. If you're listening via audio, if you could please come on over to YouTube, type in WeGo, WEIGO. In case you don't know, that stands for What Else is Going On podcast, and subscribe. I'm over there. All right, y'all, let's get into it. First up, we start off the episode with Gretchen and Jen. Did anybody else feel like, did I miss the first few minutes and had to go back because it seemed like it was picking up almost in the middle of a conversation. And I was like, I didn't watch it on my TV. I watched it on my computer on Peacock. And I was like, let me hit the back button. Did I miss something? Because I felt like I was just dumped in the middle of a conversation, which quite frankly, I didn't want to be in. Jen. Looking at you a little funny style, Jen. Yeah, we gonna get into that. So Jen had her purse on the floor and said Heather told her that's why she's broke. I said, well, I don't know in other communities, but I know, hold on, y'all, sorry. I don't know in other communities, but I know in black folks, your money, don't put your purse on the floor. And even now, as an adult, I'll find myself if I put it on the floor, like, oh, my grandmom said, and my mom says she does the same thing. I remember the first time my grandmom said, don't put your money on the floor, or you won't have no, don't put your purse on the floor, you won't have no money. I said, grandmom, if that was the truth, I would climb up and put it on the roof every night just to ensure. But so they talk about how Tamara's singing got brought up. Gretchen basically tries to frame it as though it was Heather and Emily's fault because they kept wanting to hear the audio, but they wouldn't have never known about an audio if you didn't bring it up, Gretchen. And then you didn't have to throw in when she effed the 98, when she allegedly effed the 98 degrees guy, right? I kind of wonder if Tamara did it though. There's a part of me that thinks she did based on her initial reaction last week, which I don't think I talked about in my video, but I feel like there might be a little bit of truth to it. But anyway, allegedly. But anyway, she said what was meant to be silly turned into something else. Girl, you saying that, you thought that they were going to skip over that. Oh, we don't care about you saying that. We just want to hear her sing. If I was with somebody and they said that, I would be like, oh my gosh, excuse me? Wait, when was this? I would naturally ask questions as well. So Jen tells Gretchen, look, I'm sad that you're not going to Tamara's party. They do a flashback last week after Tamara stormed out of the tactical thing they did, activity. She came back and said, by the way, I forgot I'm having a spring fling party. All y'all invited except for you, Gretchen. I said, well, all right now. So Jen tells Gretchen, we're not going to change her. So we just need to try to be mindful of the energy that we give her. Jen, look, I don't dislike you, Jen. I was really liking you, wanting you to find your voice with Tamara, hold Tamara accountable. Don't let her run all over you. At the same time, I still kind of feel like, I feel like with some of those conversations, even though we know Katie had a little lying problem. I think you still left her out to dry with some of those conversations by acting like you didn't remember. And also the stuff that you trying to do, like you are definitely trying to form allyships with people not to have as ammunition in case something happened with Tamara, but like, no, we really about to like drag her, which I guess some people may say you can't be mad. That's what Tamara does. So I don't know. Y'all let me know what y'all think though. Are y'all okay? Because later on we find out she starts following the guy's wife. And in her confessional, she says why, but she doesn't say why to Tamara. But anyway, let's go to Tamara and Eddie. Tamara is home decorating for her spring fling party. Eddie comes in. She lets Eddie know, look, at the tactical party, it got out of control. Well, before that, she says Shannon, he wants to know who's coming to the party. She said not Gretchen, but Shannon is coming. After everything, after the Temecula trip, Shannon reached out and said, listen, I know that you're going through a lot with Teddy. I think about her every day. And then sent her some options for Teddy. And Tamara said, she felt like maybe that was her olive branch. So then they get into the tactical of it all. And she said, look, things got out of control. Gretchen saying I slept with a pop star. We got into it. It wasn't good. Y'all, why did I put in my notes? I said, they keep bleeping it out, but we know Tamara they're alleging Tamara slept with the guy from New Edition. I said, and then I thought about it for a second. I said, did you just say New Edition in your notes? Because I dictate the notes in my phone. We all know it's actually 98 degrees. So Jen started following his wife. His wife reached out to Tamara, the guy, Jeff Timmons, his wife, Simmons or Timmons, child, one of them. His wife reached out to Tamara to be like, Jen started following me. Or I thought Jen started following her, but maybe Jen started following him. Either way, I was like, Jen, you got to be smarter than that. Why would you have to follow? You could have liked, or you could have, but later on in the episode, she explains why. Anyway, so she says she's upset with Heather. I was like, They flash back to them being at the tactical place and Emily saying that Heather called Slade, and that's how the stuff came out. I don't like how Emily running back and telling these stories. She made it seem as if Heather called Slade. I don't know which one of them picked up the phone to call Slade, but Heather wanted to hear Tamara's voice audio. She said, the affair stuff, gross. I don't want to hear nothing about that. So the way Emily is trying to run it back, and this is one of the many reasons why Emily gets on my nerves. Anyway, we ain't gonna spend too much time. Moving on. So in her confessional, the producer asked Tamara, basically, why is she upset with Heather? And she says, look, Heather doesn't take sides. I get it. She doesn't want to argue with anybody, but just stick up for me for once. She's been doing that all season, trying to not justify your behavior, but get people to see the reason behind your behavior. She's stuck up for you many a times. And I keep saying, and I put it in my notes for the end of the episode when Tamara and Heather get into it. Tamara saying, I've always been a friend to you. I've always been nothing but nice to you. Child, that is not true. When Heather left the show, didn't come back, Tamara dragged her through the mud. And I remember Heather being like, oh, like on her podcast, why? Like, so then Tamara says, a friend to everybody is a friend to nobody. I said, well, child, you're a friend to nobody and an enemy to everybody. Heather and Shannon meet up. I have to say, I looked at Heather. She's looking really good this season. I like her with the long hair. Face looks good. All of that. Shannon showed up, child, with her readers broke. Heather said, Shannon can't just show up somewhere looking ready. And Shannon always does look disheveled. A piece of hair missing, a track showing, something out of whack, something broken. And she remember when she first started, she was not like that in those seasons. She always looked very put together. And so they are doing, and I hope I'm saying it right, kintsugi or kintsuke, which is a traditional Japanese art form. Instead of throwing away the pieces that we may have once considered broken, they're adorning their scars. So they smashed some pieces and then they're going to put them back together with like epoxy and stuff. In the meantime, Gina and Emily meet at the shop. I said, in the words of Stephen A. Smith, we don't care. We don't care. But because it's in the show, I'm going to run through it real quick. Gina says even though Tamara and Gretchen were ripping their faces off, she was excited because the fight was about a pop star whose concert she went to. And she shows Emily pictures of her being at this concert. In the meantime, we go back with Shannon and Heather. And Shannon's like, well, did you ever hear the song? And Heather said, no, nobody ever played it. And so then Shannon says, how can you sing and moan at the same time? And Heather demonstrates. It was funny. I think Heather could be a comedic actress if she so chose. Okay. Shannon says she's grateful that she wasn't in the altercation, but it was insane. And Heather said she went out when Tamara stormed out, she went out after her and told her, you can't behave like that, grabbing people's wrists and just being so aggressive. You have to be able to communicate back with Emily and Gina. Gina said her problem was with how aggressive that Tamara gets. Y'all remember when Emily was aggressive? Anyway, her problem, and um, I was being petty when I threw that in there. I admit it. Emily says, look, I don't like the conflict. Girl. She said, so then she lets Gina know at the slumber party, they did some shady questions. One of them was, who do you trust the least? Heather and Emily both said Tamara, and Heather said, I wouldn't trust Tamara with sensitive information. So back with Shannon and Heather, Shannon brings up some of the conversations they had in Temecula. And Shannon said, Tamara told me that I'm a grudge holder and I'm not. And Heather said, well, we all are to some degree. Shannon said, there was a lot of nitpicking on the trip and your name came up. And Heather said, oh, my name? And that's how cool she was, how she played it when they were when she was at Crustacean with Emily and Gretchen. Like, what was your answer when Emily said that Jen asked the question if Heather was scared of Tamara? So Shannon said, they flashed back to them talking about Heather doing improv. And Shannon said, look, I told them you were doing groundlings. And they were like, why is Heather doing comedy? She's not a comedian. Heather said, I'm a comedic actress. I've even done stand up. Her confessional, Heather was disappointed because she said they should be supporting her no matter what it is. That's what a girlfriend does. So there's that. Jen and her son Dawson and Harrison they go so that Harrison can get a tattoo. He's been talking about it for a long time. They show a little flashback. He's getting ready to go into the Marines, into boot camp, and she is terrified. He'll be gone for 13 weeks, come home for 10 days, and then be gone. And that's how it is. And my daughter went to the boot camp, came back. She was stationed in North Dakota. Y'all, I promise you, we went out to visit her because she wanted to not be stationed in North Dakota. And she put in for a permanent assignment in Japan. And her superiors were telling her, no, you're never going to get it. Basically, you don't have a chance in hell. I remember she told me, Mom, she called me and said, I prayed, I put it in, and she got it. So she got to have her home base in Japan. But before she went there, again, she was in North Dakota. Y'all, we went out there. The only black people I saw was on the base. I said, ain't none of them out here. But yeah, but then, your child is all the way out there. And then in Japan, she wasn't then. She went to Kuwait and she was a part of the people that looked after the base to make sure no Kuwaitis, I guess, came in to attack. So I get how Jen is feeling. Like, he wants to do recon. How do you do recon and then come home and not have a different mindset? I know my daughter had a different mindset on how she looked at the United States of America. She really got to see firsthand the treatment of black people and black women in the military. That was her experience. So I get what Jen is saying. Dawson goes to get his tattoo. He starts sweating, and you could see the sweat running down his body. He got 777. All of a sudden, they get to that third seven. He starts shaking. I thought he had a seizure. And they're like, what is going on? And I honestly thought he was going to pop up and be like, psych. That was scary. I didn't know that could happen to somebody getting a tattoo, because he said, you know how it feels when you're either your sugar is low or you don't eat. That's the feeling he was getting. So they put the alcohol underneath his nose and he came back. I would have been scared too. I'm not gonna, again, I didn't know that could happen when you were getting a tattoo. Y'all, do I need to get my trans stamp removed? I have one, but I want to get the one on my shoulder touched up, and I want to get like 5 or 6 more. My kids all have tattoos. They love tattoos. My youngest, I let her get it at 16 because to me, hope she loves it when she's 40. But like, it's beautiful now. She got 2 butterflies and represent me and her. But Yeah, I did not know that could happen when you get a tattoo. So I guess make sure you eat, drink a Gatorade before you go. Emily, oh, and they talked about the wedding ceremony. Ryan said, hey, it was good for the kids. The kids were like, they could care less. They like Ryan now. They didn't like him before. Because in the beginning, when Jen and her husband broke up, the husband sat the kids down and said, hey, your mom's with the guy that stole her from this family, pretty much. And they didn't like him. They good now. Emily's house, her and Shane, food is delivered. They got pizza. And we know that Luke is dealing with some eating things. Eating is an issue falling under whatever he is dealing with. And he likes cheese pizza. They didn't bring his cheese pizza. She says, "Do you want? I could pull the pepperonis and stuff off the other pizza." He says no, so he goes to his regular meal, which is rice, and it has to be a certain rice. I get it, y'all. I used to eat oatmeal like that, not cooked, straight out of the pack. Don't judge me, and it could only be great value oatmeal. At my job, people would be like, "I brought you some oatmeal. I brought you some Quaker oats, the maple, the cinnamon, or even the regular." And I was like, that doesn't taste the same. So I don't do it anymore. But I used to eat oatmeal. So I'm with Luke. I can taste the difference. So they have the boys see therapists. Emily said she thought it was important that they see separate therapists. She doesn't know if her other son, Keller, is going because Luke is going, but she still set it up for him to go. And again, their own therapist. And I think I would have never thought about that. That's a good choice because I've heard twins before say their parents kind of didn't consider them as individuals. So I think it's good that she's starting early, considering them as individuals, so they each have their own therapist and all of that. She said that so the kids go upstairs. The therapist says he might be autistic, so they don't know. But the issue is the learning disability. And I put in my note, side note, I like Emily's earrings. See, I know how to give. Anyway, Luke's diagnosis was complicated. He has anxiety, ADHD, and OCD, and he has a learning disability and dyslexia. So she said it hurt her to know he had been struggling in school because they didn't know. I said, well, now they know they have a path forward. That's good that that they weren't ignoring the issue or chalking it up to him being defiant or him, they didn't just dismiss what was going on. I get the parent guilt, but she did say that she was in the fourth grade and didn't know he couldn't read. And I was just kind of like, is that normal? But, at least he's getting the help he needs now. So she said Shane has also changed his parenting style, which has alleviated a lot of stress. The day of Tamara's party, her party looks so pretty. Child, in the meantime, Gretchen is taking pictures with her daughter and Slade. Shannon FaceTimes Gretchen to see if she was okay. She feels like that Tamara does need, because she knows Gretchen's not going to be at the party, she feels like Tamara does need to apologize because her aggression wasn't okay. In her confessional, Shannon says she heard Gretchen apologize. They show a flashback of Gretchen saying, I'm sorry. She said, but if Tamara were to get a little bit of information, she would run with it, but she can't take when others do that to her. Emily arrives first, looking around at everything. Tamara says, I feel like you'd be good at cake decorating. You're artistic. Emily says, I am. Tamara said, I was going to make a joke, but I'm not. She said, oh, you have self-control now? And then she says, let me get a drink before we get into everything that happened to Gretchen. So Tamara said, I feel good. I've been wanting to do that. So Tamara said, it's funny how they show their true colors. Emily says she was surprised by some of the stuff that Gretchen was saying because that doesn't fit her image. Then she talks about how when Emily and Gretchen were riding up to Heather's sleepover, they had a moment of prayer outside the car. I said, just like the political party that she's affiliated with, and by that I don't mean Democrat and Republican, I mean the Trumplicans, okay? Because there's Democrats, there's Republicans, and there's Trumplicans, aka MAGA. Okay, nobody, I know that's, anyway. They talk about and do displays of Christianity, but how do they live their real lives? Do they care about the people that Jesus would have cared about if he was still walking the earth? You know what I'm saying? Like, So to have that public display of prayer outside, making sure the cameras catch it, to me was so phony. Emily and I, and I'm not saying I pray before trips or whatever. I normally pray in my house and then walk. To me, I just feel like Emily did it to be seen. I mean, Gretchen did it to be seen. Maybe not. That's what I got from it. And I'm not changing my mind. That's what I got on that. Anyway, no matter what, no matter what you believe in, whether you're Christian, Buddhist, Muslim, it's not about you just doing these displays of what you believe in. It's about how you live your life and how you treat people and your heart towards the same people that whoever you believe in, how they felt about them. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, so again, I feel like Gretchen was being performative. So Tamara says, so they did show the flashback to them praying. So Tamara said, people that are Christian and then go and basically spread nasty rumors hide behind the Jesus curtain. I said, now correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't Tamara get baptized and wasn't she? I'm saved. I'm not saying she's not because no one's perfect. Although I don't like the excuse. I think sometimes people use the excuse, I'm not perfect to absolutely like plan to do heinous things and then hide behind that excuse. I'm not perfect. It's like, but you live your life like an evil person. But anyway, it is what it is. I do agree with Tamara though. There are Christians that do that and then hide behind the Jesus curtain. But anyway, do Emily and Gretchen go to, do Tamara and Gretchen, did they ever go to the same church? I wonder. And Vicky, can you imagine? Emily said, let me fill you in on some stuff that happened in LA. Of course, she brings up the question that they asked, who do you trust the least? She said, me and Heather. Said you. Emily said, I'm terrified that I'll share something with you. Mind you, by this time, the cake lady's there. She said, I'm terrified that and I hope I'm not demeaning her by saying cake lady, chef, baker. Emily said, I'm terrified that if I say something to you, like share something vulnerable, when you get mad, you're going to use it as a weapon. Yeah, of course she is. Emily says, you have a pattern. You have to admit that you do things like that. So is you always have clean hands and everyone else is always the villain. Tamara grabs her drink and said, I can't believe this. She starts to cry. So then Emily says, now you're pissed at me. And Tamara says, I'm hurt by you. I said, child, Emily want to keep that housewives check, don't she? So Tamara leaves off. Emily tells the woman making the cakes, well, that was great. She said, the woman making the cake said, I'm just going to stay over here in my corner. So Emily said, this isn't my house. I don't know what to do. Gina arrives. Emily starts telling her what happened. Tamara comes downstairs, gives her a hug. And Emily's like, can we finish the conversation? Tamara said, when I get done, if I can't be trusted, nobody supports me, it hurts my feelings. Gina said, we support you. They actually do, because when Tamara was nasty in New Orleans and left, they had all this to say, that, rat-a-tat-tat. As soon as Emily had her Persian New Year's, when Tamara came, they went right up to her. Listen, you just got to communicate and hug us. So, like, that's what I mean about Tamara was pissing me off this episode. Like, girl, you can't go into victim mode. I'd rather you stand in villain mode than try to play victim because the victim card don't work. So, wait a minute. Oh, yeah. Okay. So they say, Gina says, we actually do support you. And then Gina says, I was actually happy you slept with that guy. Tamara said, I didn't, but I could have if I wanted to. I said, not you talking about you being friends with his wife, but on national TV saying you could have if you wanted to. I, for those of you listening, no, there wasn't a glitch. That was me being silent, looking at the camera. Like, why would you say that? Okay, anyway. Tamara says, I talked to his wife. She sent me screenshots that Jen had just followed her. Again, y'all let me know. I thought she said Jen followed the wife, but maybe Jen followed the guy based on the conversation that we're going to have later. So Emily says, does she want dirt or tickets? Jen's walking in as they're talking about it. So Gina said, I might, but as a fan, like I would follow. So it must be the guy that Jen followed the guy. Gina said, I would want tickets, but as a fan, you know? So they go out to Tamara's backyard because by this time, everybody's arriving. They go out to Tamara's backyard. It's beautiful. And Tamara says, I remember walking into a spooky party years ago. They show a flashback from 2014. There was it was Shannon, Heather, Tamara. I forget who else, if I was missing somebody else. Anyway, Jen says, I saw Gretchen and she feels bad. Tamara said, well, Heather told me that she believes her lies. And Heather said, that is not what I said. And I said, see, that's Emily and Tamara have a tendency to do that. Gina as well. That's not what I said. Heather said, I said, Gretchen doesn't lie when she speaks because she believes what she's saying. Now, I've heard people say that too. But if it's a lie, just because they believe their own lies don't mean they're not lying. Period. Because Tamara said, so she's a sociopath. Point for Tamara. Emily said, but that's the same thing we say about Katie. Child, here we go. Tamara said, I'm meeting up with Katie. I talked to her and we're going to do a sit down and going to tell me everything. So Emily says, why? Tamara said, because something she said resonated with me. And something in my gut is telling me that Gretchen 100% told Katie, she said this in her confessional, that I drugged her and she had to go to the hospital. So then back in the scene, Emily said, so you're going to go sit down with someone that hurt me and my children, that hurt. Then she is talking about Gina and says, called her racist, that recorded Shannon without her knowledge, went after you, and you're going to sit down with her and believe what she has to say. She said, because it works for your narrative against Gretchen. I said, I mean, that is a good question, but also Tamara called you Shrek. Tamara has gone, like, the things that she's saying about Katie, Tamara has done some of those things too, and you're willing to be on this show with her. Maybe it's different. I don't know. Anyway, Tamara said, I believe that she has information that I want. That's it. So Emily said, if you sit down with her, that pisses me off. So this is the one time that I agree with Tamara. Tamara said, okay. Que sera, sera, pretty much. Whatever will be, and walked off. So Tamara walks in, and Emily said, she's saying she's hurt that I didn't trust her. And Heather said, well, we said that. In the meantime, Tamara was in her confessional and said they sat down with Gretchen, who's done 100 times worse than Katie. This is the double standards that I hate. Heather walked in to go check on Tamara. And she says, I'm ready to bake a cake. Tamara said, this is the last time I'm ever going to film. I said, here we go. Heather said, and she said, it's because of what you've done to me. Heather said, what did I do? Tamara tells her the conversation they had about her. Heather said, I'm hurt by you. You blew me off in New Orleans. I sat down with you. You weren't nice to me. Shannon just told me the other day that you were talking about my career again, and it's how it's a big effing joke. And they bring up the groundlings. Outside, Shannon is saying, oh, now I'm going to get in trouble because they could hear the conversation. So Tamara says, ask the other girls what they said about you. Here we go. Gina comes in. She says, I want to know what happened when you talked about me in the groundlings. Gina said, I didn't know you were a comedian, Heather. I've never seen this funny side from you before. Heather said, what do you think acting is? And that was a point. Like, people aren't psychos. Like, the people that have played psychos in movies and killers, you may not have seen them kill people, but they played in movies. So I get what Heather was saying then. It's like, me being a comedic actor doesn't mean that I'm hilarious in real life. It's acting. So Heather said, why don't you go watch anything I've done? Gina said, she hasn't, but she just doesn't really find Heather funny. Heather said, if you want to make fun of me as an athlete, that's funny. Gina said, okay, write everything that, like, she needs to write everything down she's done because I was like 4. This is what she says in her confessional when her stuff came out. So Gina is basically telling Heather, we all know you don't like confrontation. You don't get in a confrontation with nobody except for when it comes to me. You'll take it from Tamara, but not with me. And Heather steps forward says, I'm not scared of nobody. I ain't scared of nobody. I said, did I see Heather do a neck roll? Because wait a minute. Now, and this is where I feel like Heather had a point again. She said, all y'all were pissed at Tamara in New Orleans, but I'm the only one that sat down with her and tried to talk about how I felt about the situation. Because remember, again, Tamara left New Orleans. They didn't see her again until they were at Emily's house. And Tamara came in like she was so nervous and they all went running. They went over there. So I agree with Heather. All y'all talk about, I'm scared, I'm this, I'm that, but I'm the only one that's willing to sit down and tell her how I feel. Even if she dismisses it, I wasn't scared to sit down and have the conversation. So I get that. Gina and Heather go off to talk about this. And what's funny is, as they're going off to talk about it, Shannon, Jen, Emily, and Tamara are in the kitchen, right? Jen said, I don't know her as a stand up comedian or whatever. Tamara said, don't tell her that. Shannon said, I did. I told her yesterday. Some of Shannon's just, when she's not trying to be a part of a Lucy and Ethel skit, she can be naturally funny. To me, that was so funny because she did tell her that. She was honest. So Heather's telling Gina, I put all my stuff aside to raise my family, the acting that I was doing. I'm in a different space. So you don't know anything about my career. Did you know that I did stand up? Gina said no. Heather said, so it's hard, and y'all aren't supportive. In her confessional, she talks about she's scared. She wonders if it's too late. Is she too old? Does she still have it? All of these things. So Gina said, I didn't know you as Heather Page Kent in comedy. Your personality isn't like that. And I was thinking in my head, that's why it's called acting. To say to somebody, oh, I don't know you as a serious actor because your personality isn't like that. Because it's acting. And there's a part of me that gets what, I think there's a disconnect in Gina's brain, and not in a bad way, but as far as Heather being an actual actress, I think that's what it is. She doesn't see, it's not that she doesn't see Heather as funny. I think she don't see Heather as having an actual career as an actress. And I don't mean it in the sense of Heather being bad or good because she's never seen Heather in things, because she just doesn't know the actress part of Heather. And I think because of that, she doesn't see Heather as an actress. Again, not saying she don't think that Heather can or can't act. I wouldn't call you an actress. Maybe she would call, you know what I mean? So I think that's where the disconnect is with Gina and thinking an actor in real life has to be like the genre they play. She don't see Heather as an actor, period. So they hug, they apologize. Oh, because Heather tells her I had to audition to get into the Groundlings. Heather says, I'm proud of you. I'm always going to be proud of you. They go inside. Shannon, so they're all start to frost their cake. Shannon said, Lisa, that's the name of the baker / chef. What am I looking like? And Lisa was like a professional. In her confessional, Shannon says, I'm more of a chef than a baker. So I guess that could be fun. But cooking is not something that relaxes me. So maybe if me and Corey went on a cooking date, it might be fun because of the banter that him and I would have. But I'm not into that. I'm not into the sip and paint. Child, I want to go out and talk. And I guess you can talk while you paint. I don't like doing things that can sometimes cause me a little bit of stress. And I hated art growing up. My creativity came out in writing and performing and doing different things. But art, I hated art. So to me, a sip and paint, even though it's not supposed to be perfect, it would still make me I don't know. But they seemed like they had a good job, a good time doing the cake. So Lisa starts telling them how to ice the cake. Gina said it's like a blowjob class. So at the end, they thank Tamara for putting it together. Tamara is upset. So Tamara brings up how after she left the tactical place, the 98 Degrees band member's wife contacted her, and I had a long conversation with her. And the chef is just kind of I'm just going to take some plates because she knows what's coming. She was cute. Tamara let Jen know, look, I got screenshots of you following him. In my notes, I put the lady, but again, now I realize after talking it out with y'all that she followed him. So she shows the screenshot. She said, Jennifer, the wife sent me a screenshot of Jennifer following him, and somebody said, Jennifer who? And they said, Padranti. Shannon said, oh, she's coming in with the evidence. Jen said, why do you care about that? Tamara said, oh, wait, Tamara did say, why did you start following her? So maybe I am right. Either way, she followed one of them people. Jen said, so when Tamara said, why do you start following her? Jen said, because you guys have a situation going on and I heard about it. Clearly, you wanted the information, which she says in her confessional. The producer says, like, why did you follow? And Jen said, because I figured he would see the name and maybe he would have something to say. But he didn't, so nothing happened. Just say that all the way to Tamara. The same way you get dirt on people, I was like, if he feels so inclined, he could send me some. I don't know. A couple of the ladies went back out to Tamara's backyard. Jen and Tamara are arguing, and Jen said, look, Gretchen told me about the whole thing with you guys. Tamara says there was no whole thing. I said, at this point, Jen, you might not be moving any better than Katie. I'm just saying because you accused Katie of moving a certain way or whatever, but I don't know. What y'all think? In her confessional, oh, I already told y'all that. Jen says to Tamara, I wanted to move forward, but then you do something like this. And this is where I agree with Tamara. You can't have been wanting to move forward with me. But then, even though Tamara doesn't know she said it, we know she said, I followed him because she basically wanted to get some information on Tamara. But now Jen's trying to flip it and say, I wanted to move forward with you, but then you do stuff like this. No, Tamara knew what you were trying to do when she plays the game. She's been playing it longer than you, Jen. So Tamara knew what your move was in following the husband or the wife to get information. So for you to sit in my, because if it was me, for you to sit in my face and say you was hoping that we move forward, but you did this, and I know why you did it was to get information. Just be honest. And I feel like, I guess that's maybe Jen. Maybe we're starting to see that sometimes Tamara could be onto something when she says about Jen, Jen lies or Jen sneaky behind the scenes. Because again, I do believe Katie when she says Jen was there for some of the conversations that she's had. And Jen's like, I don't remember. I was like, Tamara may have been on to something when she said that Jen does lie about some things. Because again, you couldn't have wanted to move forward with Tamara, but on the back end, trying to get information, right? So I feel like in that instance, I see what Tamara was saying. And I'm not saying Tamara would not have done it. You know what I mean? That's how she knows what Jen's play is. But Jen is not going to outsmart in this Housewives game, Tamara, at least not yet. So, because remember, Jen is the one that reached out to Gretchen and said, hey, you've had experience with Tamara on the show. How do I deal with her? And that's how they started talking. Anyway, Heather goes in to check on Tamara. And then Emily says, Heather just told me in LA she's the least one she trusts. And she goes in and checks on her. Shut up. Just because she went to go check on her doesn't mean she's not going in there to spill her life story. She's going in there to check on her. Child. Tamara says, I'm done. She get ready to quit. Shannon says, did you hear that, Gina? She's quitting again. Tamara said, I thought that we were close. And for you to say that about me hurts my feelings. I don't want to be in this group anymore. Heather said, I don't trust you with my feelings. Yeah. She said, and if we were friends, we should be able to talk about this, but you don't want to hear what I have to say. Here go Tamara. You don't want to hear what I have to say. Heather said, oh, I heard you. Tamara said, I heard what you said. Heather said, oh, okay. Well, that's what it is. Then that's what it is. Tamara tells Heather that Heather was aggressive with her at the lowest time of her life, Teddy. And I'm sorry. Let me take that back. Rewind. I'm not sorry. This is how I feel. Tamara is using Teddy being ill as a way to excuse her behavior. Because she keeps bringing it up. I'm like this. I'm acting like this. You guys aren't understanding. My friend is going through this. That don't mean you can be an a-hole to us. It just don't. It's not like you did it once, twice, like, y'all, I need to check myself. I'm so sorry. Nah, you don't get to do that. So anyway, Tamara says, it makes me sad. So the producer says, have you ever given these women any reason to not trust you? Tamara says, I mean, it just makes me sad. I know I'm not perfect. I know I'm a good person. I'm not a liar. I'm not a cheater. So for them to say they don't trust me feels like it's an attack on my character and it makes me want to shut down. All that is cute, but you didn't answer the question. Have you given these women a reason to not trust you? Heather goes outside and basically all the ladies are like, we ready to go. They come inside. Tamara's cleaning up. They say, do you need help? She says no. Emily and Heather are still in the kitchen trying to clean. Emily said, are you going to talk? Tamara says, the fact that both of you say you don't trust me is effed up. Heather said, this is a great example of you doing this constantly, quitting, getting angry. She brings up again, it's one of the most difficult things she's going through in her life and how they're not helping. Outside, Shannon said, do you see the visceral reaction just from them saying, I don't trust you? Then Shannon says the cookie's good. They talk about how good the cookie is, but then Gina says, it's a little dry. Shannon says, yeah. Tamara cries and says, thank you for being a friend, like sarcastically. Thank you for being so understanding. Heather said, I know you're upset. We're going to talk another time. Tamara says, have a great season. Emily and Heather walk away. And Tamara says, I'm absolutely done. I said, production needs to Lisa Rinna her. She quits, and then the next time she come back and be like, psych, I just had a bad night. They was like, we're going to go ahead and keep it. Because remember, Lisa Rinna emailed the RHOBH people and said she had quit and then woke up and thought about it. And they was like, nah, that's okay. We're going to go ahead and keep your resignation. That would show Tamara something. You don't get to be just quitting and coming back. To me, I don't want to see that. I don't want to see that. Just like people always walking out of scenes. Sometimes it may get so heightened that you have to remove yourself. But when it becomes a go-to, and this whole quitting every other episode is really, we don't want to see it. We don't want to see it. What did y'all think of the episode? Are y'all watching? Or are y'all just listening to a review? If you're watching, what do y'all think about Jen? Do you think she's changing or revealing a side to her that we haven't seen? Do you think Tamara was right about her with some things? Y'all think that Tamara is using Teddy's sickness as basically a weapon against the ladies? And what y'all think about Heather being a comedic actress? Y'all let me know. Love y'all. Talk to you later. Please, again, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share. Hype the video if you want, if there's a hype button next to it. And then also follow the podcast wherever it is you listen to your podcast. I love y'all. I will be back later to talk Miami and the frustration I felt. See ya.